Colleen Boselli empowers professionals to recognize their authenticity and maximize their strengths. With more than 30 years as a corporate leader, consultant, and business coach, she co-founded Strength Catalyst Partners. Colleen has worked with executives globally, including those at Alphabet or Google, Pfizer, Apple, and LinkedIn. Her background in marketing and advertising enhances her skills in situational analysis, logical reasoning, and personal branding. Colleen also serves on Oceanside Perspective's advisory board as strengths coach. Keep listening to learn more about how to unleash your leadership potential by maximizing your strengths.
I'm thrilled to have my friend Colleen here. Colleen, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Helen. I'm excited to be here.
We know each other for many years.
Yeah.
So I'm really looking forward to this conversation because as a friend to friend.
I love talking about strengths, so I'm happy to share any and all of my experience that will be helpful to whoever's listening.
Yeah. This season we focus on, leading with emotional intelligence. So there's really two sort of big elements there. One is leadership, what makes a good leader. This episode that we're really going to deep dive into strengths-based leadership. And the other side, the focus is emotional intelligence. Mm-hmm. And there's many tools out there. And however, I believe, the strengths profile that you have been coaching people, and I also personally benefited from it, is one of the most effective tool for self-awareness, which is a foundation for emotional intelligence. Mm-hmm. So throughout today's conversation, I hope to be able to touch base on many of those points.
Excellent. Okay.
Yeah. But before we get there, I want to help our audience to get to know you a little more. You have a very, very interesting life story to tell. But if you would pick a few things that has defined your life, what are those things?
I was reflecting on kind of how I got to where I am today and also what I know about using your strengths. And one of the many things that we know when we're trying to spot strengths in other people is to really ask them to think about what did they want to be when they were younger. And honestly, what I wanted to be when I was young was a motivational speaker. And like many people, I was fascinated by and so impressed with Martin Luther King. And I thought, I want to be a version of that in some way or another. So my interest in helping people and being a strength strategist started when I was young. I've heard me tell the story to some of your students that even as a kid, I used to ride my bike to the local library and check out self-help books, at age 12 and 13, and I found that fascinating. So the idea of helping people build their confidence and know themselves better is something that's been important to me for a long time. Probably a second major influence on where I am now is that when I was in my late 30s and the mother of a 5-year-old, a 4-year-old, and a 3-month-old, I was diagnosed with stage 3 breast cancer. Totally out of the blue. It was a huge shock. And I had just gone back to work from my maternity leave when I found out about that diagnosis. Through the year that I had surgery and chemotherapy and radiation, I was very enthusiastic about getting back. If I survived all that, which thank God I did, but enthusiastic to get back to my prior life and schedule, what have you. But I was also very reflective on, what maybe was I doing that made me vulnerable to that disease. And I didn't have the language then that I have now, but I knew even then, and can speak even more clearly about it now, that there were things that I was doing, most particularly in my job, that despite the fact that I was really good at them, or strengths that I had that I was very good at, they were draining me, and I was carrying a lot of stress, and I deeply believe that stress made me vulnerable to, the cancer that eventually, set me back for a little while. So that experience and that reflection caused me to really think about, all right, well, if I'm going to go back to work, and I'm going to be a mother of 3 and now 4 and a working mother at that, what could I be doing that comes from kind of the core of who I am and enables me to use my most energizing strengths and hopefully, if possible, minimizes the exposure I have to my weaknesses and, importantly, the time that I spend using my draining strengths. So that's how I shifted out of the corporate world into executive coaching. Yeah, so that's probably the second major thing I could think of that had an influence on me and where I am today.
So from like a childhood hero,
Yeah,
right? Yeah, to like really life-changing event. Well, that's two very strong reasons, I would say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that life-changing event, in many ways, was a blessing. And sometimes we need life-changing events to cause us to slow down. Because when I came out of college, I was quite interested in some sort of a career that would give me an opportunity to be a leader. And I liked creative environments. So I went into the advertising industry, specifically in the role of account management, because that, to me, was an opportunity for me to be a leader of the people on the particular account team, and give me a chance to interact with different types of people. A creative person, very different from a research person, very different from a client who's paying the bill. And I'm really glad I did that, and it put me on a track. But when that track all of a sudden had a halt, it was a good thing. It was a good thing because it caused me to make this shift. And I feel maybe even more sure that this is where I'm supposed to be now because of my childhood thoughts that maybe got a little derailed, maybe a little bit, because of the momentum in the career that I was having and the success I was having. And not that everything I was doing was draining, but certainly it wasn't as fulfilling as I feel I am right now.
Do you think that people know their strengths? Like, I feel like we all have some level of self-awareness, right? And so, if I'm doing something really well and people always praise me for that, let's say if I even probably get a promotion because I did something really well, and is that my strength?
I think that part of the answer is yes, and part of the answer is no. So the part of the answer that is yes is that we do pay attention to what other people say to us, or the grades that we receive in school, or the feedback we get from performance evaluation, et cetera. And that gives us some sense for sure of what our strengths are. And if we're fortunate, maybe somewhere along the way in our education, we were the beneficiary of some sort of a strength assessment that gave us an even clearer, perhaps, list of what our strengths might be. But for most people, it's vague, and a lot of people are humble, and it's even uncomfortable for them to be thinking about or talking about what their strengths are. When they get asked that question in an interview, they get nervous, despite the fact that it's me. And we are going to talk today about a tool you can use to help with that. So anyway, that's sort of my yes answer to that question. But my no answer to that question is related to the fact that in my world, a strength is something that has three parts. It's something you perform well, it's something that gives you energy, and it's something that you use. And it's the energy piece there that no one else will know but you. People can give you more responsibility or pat you on the back or give you a promotion or congratulate you on a job well done. And yes, you could have done that quite well, but it could have been draining for you. And if it's draining for you, then it's really not a strength. So therefore, it's really important for you to know the difference between the strengths that you have that energize you and the strengths that you have that drain you, so that you can make some strategies for yourself and be intentional and find the opportunities that give you a chance to use the more energizing strengths.
What do you think about self-awareness? Is self-awareness, you think it's more art or science?
That's a really good question. The science is helpful, and I'd maybe venture to say needed in order to provide the evidence or the thought stimulation. So science coming from some sort of an assessment is what I'm thinking about when I answer it that way. But art, because self-awareness takes reflection and it takes experimentation and it takes feedback from other people so that you get a sense of whether you are performing something in a way that does make a difference or does energize you or drain you. And that's a bit of a trial and error process. The trial and error process can be fueled intelligently and helpfully by the feedback from the assessment or from other people. But certainly as we grow and we try different experiences on in life, that helps us, sort of form that art of who we are. And think about it. We are all, every single one of us is a unique individual. And in that way, every one of us is a piece of art. And it's just a matter of, how you choose to express that piece of art and what you bring to our world that sets you apart from other people and enables you to be the best version of yourself for whatever value that gives to you and whatever value that gives to other people.
When it comes to self-awareness, by sort of the word choice, self-awareness, most people what are thinking about is more internal. It's like, do I know myself? How much, this awareness is driven, like being perceived by myself, right? But the reality is self-awareness is actually two-way street. So, you have your own internal reflection, knowing yourself, but you also have an external feedback, right? So to complete that process, like I think this is who I am. What's that? How does people say like perception is reality?
Yes.
It doesn't matter like how do you feel about yourself, but you need other people to perceive the same way. Most likely it might be different.
Right.
It's like I carry myself this way, I intended to be this way. However, the recipient part of it coming back was very different. Sometimes even opposite.
Right.
Reaction to what you intended to be.
Right.
So people use different tools for self-awareness, and self-awareness is such a foundational thing for emotional intelligence. I wonder, before you decided what to do, which tool to use, to fulfill your passion and aspiration, you must have done some digging in terms of what's available in the market, what are some of the things doable versus something you personally feel like working better. So I'm curious about your perspective, in that sense.
There's so many different things that I could respond to that on. Well, let's see. Well, in terms of looking at tools, there are basically two types of tools that are most commonly used in executive coaching or in leadership development and self-awareness development. And those are personality tests or strength assessments. And, many of us are familiar with personality tests like Myers-Briggs or someone might know their colors from a particular assessment or
an animal sometimes.
Yeah, exactly, an animal, exactly. And in my mind, those are all helpful because it gives you more data, sort of more feedback that helps you be that much more self-reflective, and it helps you perhaps with your colleagues understand sort of who you're more similar to or how to help this person who might be a little different from me because they're a different color or a different animal. But I'm a strength strategist because I believe that understanding your strengths is fundamentally more useful than understanding what your personality type or style or category might be. Because to me, your strengths are sort of the foundation of who you are. They are the sort of the alphabet with which you create sentences and we create books. And so therefore, I chose when I was starting out in my business to take a strengths-based approach. And then, to further to your point, there are a number of strength tools on the market. And when I first started out, I was using the then called Gallup, now called Clifton Strengths Finder, which is very well-known, sort of popular in the United States. With my husband and my 4 children, earlier in my career, I moved to London. And when I moved over to London, I was looking for the experts on positive psychology in Europe so that I could sort of restart my coaching business living over there, but also perhaps affiliate with another organization that had credentials and learning opportunities for me, outside the U.S. And honestly, I discovered this organization called Capfinity online. And I reached out via email to the executive director. I would now say I probably stalked him a little bit, trying to get him to have coffee with me or lunch with me. Eventually he said yes. They were, at the time, still are very much so an academic-oriented organization. So Alex Lindley, bless his soul, went out for coffee with me, and we had a lovely conversation. Basically, I volunteered my services. What can I do with my understanding and passion for strengths-based thinking to help you? I'm not sure he knew what to do with me at the time, but I was on their radar, and just a few months later, his organization, at the time a nonprofit, introduced the prior version of what you and I both know now as a strengths profile to the market. And I signed up right away to be among the first 10 coaches in the very first training on the tool, 2-day training, and I fell in love with it. And the reason I fell in love with it, and the reason I still use it in my work and so often in my personal life now too, is because unlike other strength assessments and absolutely unlike personality assessments, it helps you understand your strengths in a very dynamic way, because it measures not only your strength performance as you self-report, but also your strengths energy, as we've been discussing, and your strength use. And it can't be a strength if it doesn't have performance associated with it. It doesn't give you energy, you don't get a chance to use it. And that granular aspect of a strength is something that other tools on the market don't offer. And also, the reason I love the strengths profile as a tool is that there are 60 strengths in this assessment. And we are complex individuals. And so to be able to look at how you use your time, where you get your energy in a way that sort of breaks it into 60 different descriptors, to me is very, very helpful.
There's 2 schools of thoughts, right? One is on personality type, one is on strength. So the personality type, I did those tests before as well.
Yeah.
It's just, maybe a unicorn, but 10% of the world population has a similar personality or same personality as me. But then I always had the question is that a fixed thing? Does that mean that is this type of personality, then I forever this type of personality? I feel like most people might have that similar thoughts. It's like, personality don't change, So it's a helpful data, but it's very unsatisfactory answer for me. I want it to be better. I want it to continuously grow and improve and be a better version of myself. If personality is somehow in my way, to preventing me from grow, I want it to be able to break through, strengths on the other side is people feel like, okay, you have the strengths, but you also not only need an internal understanding, awareness of that, but you also need external sort of affirmation, of that. But if I am aware of my strengths, what about a weakness? Do I forget about my weakness? Like I used to interview people every week, when I was at Apple and Google, when we grow the organization like crazy, right? But one of my always asked question, mask asked question is, what are your top strengths? And then what are your top weaknesses? And could you tell me a story that you utilize your strengths or you overcome your weakness, right? So I guess the misperception is, if I focus on my strength, do I work on my weakness?
Well, absolutely. I guess my short answer to your question is absolutely. You need to focus at least some percentage of your time on your weaknesses, particularly if you are vulnerable in some way with whatever those weaknesses might be. Now, the amount of energy that we put into fixing our weaknesses, the science tells us this, lends far less reward than putting the same amount of energy into doing more with our strengths. So what you want to do, therefore, is just lend one or more, hopefully more than one, strength to that weakness, trying to help kind of pull it along and get you to whatever sort of bare minimum place you need to be in order to be successful with that weakness.
That's so personality we talked about earlier, it tends to be like a fixed thing, But what about strengths? Does strengths change?
Strengths absolutely change. And I know you know that because you've taken your strengths profile several times.
I'm a different person every couple years.
Well, we are all sort of. I mean, I said to you before, a strength is dynamic, and it's dynamic not least of which is because it also measures, and we haven't talked about this very much, your strength use. So today, I could be using a particular strength in this interview. And it might feel really energizing to me because I'm providing a service to you and to OP, and it really matters, and it feels really energizing to me. I might, 6 months from now, be in a situation, or even tomorrow, where the same strength is needed, but let's say the environment in which I'm doing it is not as fulfilling, not as mission-driven as this or something like that, and that particular strength could be draining. So the context matters. If you shift your responsibilities, shift the context, something changes in your personal life, what have you, you're going to be using your strengths differently because your activities are going to be different. And so therefore, yes, your strengths will change. Now, if we had the benefit of looking, at a strength assessment, like the strengths profile, that maybe you've taken it year after year after year, we would undoubtedly see many of your strengths that would be relatively consistent year after year. The things that you're always good at, and kind of no matter the context, it really gives you energy. But we'd absolutely see some shifts too, again, based on the situations in which you are using them. So for that reason, I always say to the clients with whom I work that are similarly, strengths focused, that they should retake a strength assessment every 6 months or a year basis, so they can be that much more intentional with how they're using them. And one thing we haven't talked about, actually, another reason that I like the strength profile tool in particular, is that it also distinguishes between a strength that you're realizing and a strength that, for whatever reason, you're not realizing. And so being reflective on something that's in your toolkit that for whatever reason is not being used right now, either because you're not thinking about it, because you don't have an opportunity, but being reflective on that and saying, well, all right, I'm good at doing these kinds of things. What would it look like for me to shift my responsibility or help these people know that they can call on me for these kinds of things? Or if I can't do it in my classroom setting or in my work setting, then what strengths do I have that I could be using more in my personal life for the fulfillment that gives me, and again, the opportunity that it gives for the world, whomever is the recipient of my strengths.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned earlier, like one is performance, the other one is energy level.
Yeah.
What's the third?
Use.
Use, right? So I understand the performance and the use, but I would double click on this energy part.
Yeah.
Are you saying that in different environment, sometimes I use the same strengths, give me energy, but sometimes it drain my energy?
Yes. Yeah. All right, I'll give you an example. Let's say, well, for me, rapport building is a strength that can be energizing if I'm going into a room of people that I have some basic understanding of why they're there. And so I'm feeling kind of excited about going from person to person, introducing myself, and then be asking the question, why did you come to this conference? Because I know we all have, commonality in that regard. But that same rapport building strength of mine could be draining if I'm walking into a different event where I don't know anyone, not sure how I'm going to start the conversation, and I could be good at it once I get going, but I've got this sort of inner critic voice in my head saying, you should be home watching TV or whatever. This is going to be draining. You're not very good at this. No one wants to hear hear what you have to say, etc. So that's an example anyway of a rapport building being energizing with some people and draining with other people. And the same thing could apply to any strength that we have.
So the assessment in terms of your current strengths profile is very much related to the environment. Like how do you practice or use, right, those strengths?
Right. Environment right now. Basically, if we're looking at an assessment that you're taking, today or what have you, or in this current stage of your life.
When we go deeper, you answer some questions that I had in my mind. For example, the version of kindergarten of you versus the elementary versus middle school, high school, and university, it's very different, right? But yeah, that person might have the same personality. But something is clearly changing. But now you described that the strengths, the profile could change in terms of which environment you are in, and how does that environment enable you or empower you or allow you to use your strengths.
Right.
You could get a different portfolio.
Well, yes, I absolutely agree with what you're saying. And I would add to that, back to the point of comparison you just made to personality tests. Personality tests most commonly is going to give you a label of some sort from a choice of maybe 4 labels or 16 labels or 8 colors or what have you. But with a strength assessment, we have as many as 60 strengths. That's a lot of different levers to be pulling upon. So even in small changes of an environment might enable you to use a different strength than you did the day before. So in that way, we have opportunities to be reflective and to be intentional in a variety of ways that we as complex human beings are able to show up in this world.
Most of the strengths profile does stay pretty consistent. But once in a while, do you see like strengths become weakness or vice versa, weakness becomes strength?
Yes. Not as common as the other shifts, but absolutely yes. Often happens when there's some sort of life event for someone. Like, let's say you have children, and work ethic was something that gave them a lot of energy before they had children, when they had a lot more time to put into their work. But all of a sudden, a cute little baby to take care of, and their priorities change, and work ethic could even become a weakness, because you were saying to yourself, well, compared to being at work, this being at home is much more energizing, so my work ethic has really gone down. And as a matter of fact, I don't want to go back to work after my paternity leave. So that, that'd be one example anyway of how it could shift.
Okay, awesome. Now I'd like to maybe go down to the tool itself.
Okay.
Like, is there a different category of strengths? Like, how does the system work?
Yeah, okay. Great question. So with the strengths profile tool, the assessment's a 20-minute assessment, online assessment. And when you complete that, you'll receive a report that shows you, among the body of 60 strengths, which subset of those 60 for you are realized, which I'll explain to you in a minute, which subset of the 60, could be 2, could be 20, whatever, are unrealized, a subset that are learned behaviors, and a subset that are weaknesses. So a realized strength are those of the 60 for which you feel that you perform the strength well, get energy from it, and are able to use it. An unrealized strength is one where you perform it well, get energy from it, but are not using it as much. So you're going to have a different list of each one, very worthy of reflection. A learned behavior is sort of a strength from the standpoint that this is something where you believe, and you indicate when you fill the assessment out, that you perform it well, but it's technically not a strength because you're rated it low in energy. So basically it's a draining strength. So some subset of the 60, for most people, it's the majority, are in this sort of learned behavior category. And then finally, the assessment teases out what your weaknesses are. So quite simply what you said in your self-report, I'm not particularly strong in performance in this strength, and I'm drained by it anyway. And so with that amount of information, there's so much that one can dig into and learn about themselves and help them be reflective about other people. Something we haven't talked about that I feel like it's important for everyone to know about is that in my experience, it's not usually our weaknesses that get us into trouble. And we've been talking about weaknesses quite a bit here today. And I know people are often concerned how much time should I spend on my weaknesses. But what I like to point people to is their strengths, and in particular, are there any strengths that you're overplaying? Because it's the overplaying of the strengths that is going to happen probably more commonly than the use of our weaknesses, because our weaknesses don't feel that good. We don't think we're particularly good in that area. We're not energized by it, so we're not going to go to that sort of set of tools if we can help it. But our realized strengths, wow, that's my common sense. That's where I get my greatest energy. That's where I kind of get my high. That's where I achieve my goals. That's where I grow quickly. That's where I can get really focused. And because of all of that energy that comes from using my realized strengths, I run a pretty high risk of overplaying those. I'll give you an example from my personal life. So among my most energizing realized strengths is time optimizer. So I really like to be super efficient and to squeeze as many things into possible every day. And it just makes me feel very satisfied and energized. And I'm also a pretty optimistic person. I like to think that no matter what, I'll sort of figure it out. It'll turn out to be fine most of the time. My husband has among his lead realized energizing strengths action, which is the desire he has to kind of get going. We'll figure it out along the way, but let's just get going, right, and see what's going to happen. And prevention, what could go wrong. So these are sort of the mindset he has. So if we are scheduled to be somewhere, let's say half hour from now, 40 minutes before we're supposed to be there, he's sitting in the car ready to go because he's action-oriented and he's thinking, we could run into traffic. Meanwhile, there I am in my office. I'm sending a few more emails. I'm repacking my purse. I'm combing my hair, thinking, I got 10 more minutes. I could get 15 more things done. And we never run into traffic. There's my optimism, my Tom optimizer speaking. And so that's where the interpersonal rub happens right there. And I'll give you another example in the workforce. A number of years ago, I was working with a big company we both are familiar with. And I was coaching 2 leaders of 2 teams. And the teams needed to work together quite regularly. And the 2 leaders had a lot of conflict. And their manager said to me, can you help here? Because their teams are uncomfortable. It makes it difficult for them to be productive. And these 2 leaders are each so valuable in their own right. But when they put them in the same room, it just doesn't go well. Fortunately, they had both taken this strengths profile assessment that I've been referring to. And they both internalized and believed what they saw on the piece of paper, that these are my strengths and this is where I do get energy. And they both also had been reflective in prior conversations with me about what might happen on occasion when they overplay a strength. And I thought, I'm imagining this conflict is happening because this one's overplaying these strengths, this one's overplaying these strengths. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring them together. And rather than more typically talk about the conflict, and sort of he said, she said, whatever type of thing, let's just have a reflection on how you're using your strengths in your working relationship. So I said to person A, well, how are you using your strengths with person B? We met at a Starbucks, kind of a neutral location. And person A said, well, I like to, when we meet together with our teams, or the 2 of us together, I like to use my strength in this and this and this and this. I said the same thing. You reflect back to the other person. She did that. And then I asked them both a question. Do you think there's any possibility you might overplay any of your strengths with this person? And all of a sudden, like little light bulbs went off. And then because we were talking about the strengths and little less about maybe what might be considered the personality or the friction, then it was easier for me to say to the other person, do you feel like she's overplaying perhaps any of these strengths with you? And by the end of, I don't know, maybe an hour of conversation, and this particular part became so insightful because we not only helped kind of label where unintendedly, right, the conflict was sourced, but also we were able to go back to the strengths profile and say, all right, well, what other strength could I be using rather than the one that might be causing the conflict here to have a more productive, interaction with this individual, or when I meet with them, knowing that this is kind of the rub that I create for them and they create for me. What can we be using differently? And it made a huge difference in their relationship.
Oh, that's a great example. That's a professional example. Almost make me feel like a couple counseling.
Yeah. Oh,
the
yeah.
stress profile. Do you like have experience like this? Is like people use it more for personal life, family, relationship building and things like that?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, in my paid world, even though the focus is generally speaking on work life, so commonly people will bring in, a conflict with a partner, or trying to decide whether to make a move for the career or whatever it might be. But also because of the people in my life know that I have this passion for and interest in helping people understand their strengths. They come to me to help. As a matter of fact, this weekend, I have a nephew and his fiance coming to meet with me, each of whom just took the strengths profile because they want to think together before they have their wedding on how they can be using their strengths to support one another, which seems so beautiful to me. So I'm looking forward to that opportunity.
That's a perfect gift.
Yeah, it is. My son, actually earlier this week, sent me the resume of one of his work colleagues looking for a new job, and can you help this person? Blah blah blah. So again, it's so fulfilling, honestly, to go from the mother who's they roll their eyes to the mother who's welcomed because I've got something to offer them or their friends.
Yeah.
I'm blessed.
That's
really
your
am.
superpower.
Yeah, I guess so.
I'm curious about, what do you see the correlation between the strengths and the practice of that in relation to leadership?
Okay, yeah. Well, I guess I would say I love working with leaders who want to deepen their self-awareness, and frankly, almost no matter what challenge or opportunity that a leader brings to a coaching engagement, I really like to start with, let's start by really thinking about what are your tools, what are your strengths. So no matter whatever it is you're trying to do better, have better executive presence, or give better feedback, or hire better, or achieve this new job opportunity. The way you're going to go about that is knowing what your strengths are. So anyway, I like to start with a strengths profile assessment with any leader. And that enables them, honestly, to self-coach when I'm out of the picture, which is the greatest gift that I can give them. But when a leader is self-aware, then they are well able to build their self-confidence, because their self-confidence is grounded. All of our self-confidence is grounded in knowing what our strengths are and using them. And it enables them to recognize, what, I'm not good at everything, but my leadership role needs to have A, B, C, D, E, F, G responsibilities. So if I am not good at this strength, then who on my team currently exists, or who do I need to find to add to my team, so that there's a well-roundedness that comes from the collection of leaders from my office. So even if I am the big kahuna, I've got 2 or 3 people, or whatever the quantity might be, people that have the other strengths that I might employ, so that our entire population in the organization is served by all of us. Like, that's really, really important, and such a sign of a good leader is to recognize that they're not good at everything, and they're smart enough to find what they use to complement it.
So first of all, nobody is perfect.
Right.
So it doesn't matter what position you are.
Right.
Even if you are the president of a country, a president of a company, CEO of a company. So I would say, realistically speaking, nobody expects that person only have strengths with no weakness, right? So this tool seems like to be able to identify the weakness of the leader, and then be aware of that, and then also start hopefully recruiting the talents who would complementary with the skill set, as a team setting, as well as from leaders to forming the team standpoint.
But a strength assessment, at least those we've been talking about, are self-reports, and so there is a limitation in that a leader who takes a strength assessment and has these 3 weaknesses is what they perceive to be their weaknesses. But in order to do what you're talking about really intelligently, information should be collected from the others, who have access to that leadership and have a sense of what might be is needed that particular leader doesn't have. But armed with all of that information, the self-awareness as well as the report from other individuals enables that leader and his or her advisors to make wise decisions about how his or her leadership should be complemented.
At minimum, that the leader, I would say, be able to utilize that tool to analyze or better understand him or herself.
Right.
Identify those areas that needs to be strengthened.
Right.
Through other talents.
Right. And that makes me think of something else, Helen, and that is that leaders or managers and their reports, particularly when they're new to one another, tend to figure each other out kind of on a trial and error basis. I see if my manager checks in with me every morning or every night. Do they like a lot of detail? Do they want really high level information? Are they super organized? Or are they more go with the flow? And we kind of figure that out by working with them for a while, and that's fine. But it's not very efficient. And as a time optimizer, I want things more efficient. So another reason that I really believe that self-awareness and being able to define yourself is really important is it enables us potentially to shortchange that trial and error and to be much more efficient and to be able to educate someone who's new to your team or new to your organization as a leader as to what my style is and ask them what their style is. And so in that way, another suggestion that I have for everyone listening is that if you take a strengths profile assessment, one of the things that you can do is write a description of what your personal or your leadership brand might be. Some people, call it sort of the playbook for myself. And another reason that I love the strengths profile tool is because it takes those 60 strengths that we've been mentioning and it breaks them into 5 different families of strengths. So they're a subset of the 60 that are essentially all about kind of how you show up in the world. We call those the being strengths. And there's a subset of the 60 that are basically how you motivate yourself. You're adventure oriented, or you're courageous, or et cetera. There's a subset of the 60 that are about how you relate to other people. You're a team builder, or you are an enabler, or you like to connect people, et cetera. But anyway, these 5 different families of strengths, what one can do with the strengths profile assessment and all the definitions that it offers for each strength is to string together, a paragraph from one's key strengths in each of those 5 different dimensions, and have, a really handy 5-paragraph little summary culled from the information in the strengths profile that provides for me, a summary of what my leadership brand is and gives me an opportunity to hand this or to share it or to read it or whatever, with a colleague, or to summarize it in a LinkedIn profile or in a resume or in a bio so that people know, who I am and, how I tend to show up as a leader.
Yeah, that's perfect. Because a lot of time is people ask question, what is your leadership style, your approach, and a lot of time the people working for that leader, they like to know how to work with your boss, and then how do you support, right? What role would you play, and just get to know, the expectation better.
Right.
So this can be an effective tool is for leaders to build a brand and build a trust.
Right. And build their own self-confidence, because once what I find is once someone sees their strengths, even if it's a self-report, print it out on a piece of paper or scroll through it on a report, all of a sudden legitimizes their strengths, right? And then when they put it together, in a set of a few paragraphs, it again makes it feel more real, and it not only gives you something to talk about, but it gives you a way to sort of ground yourself and see yourself, how you're going to approach, the particular meeting or the particular set of individuals. And there's nothing, I said at the beginning, nothing more important than self-awareness, and sort of, I guess I would tack onto that, is nothing more important than self-confidence. And the two really go hand in hand. And the strengths profile really just helps you, have the tool to get there.
Yeah. Right. What's your brand? It's something that you've been doing consistently and been doing well, right? So with that strengths profile as sort of the background, then you feel like you're talking about yourself. It's authentic.
Right.
We talk about authenticity a lot. It's like, but how do you? Do you really know yourself very well, first of all? Secondly, is how do you be authentic at a workplace or anywhere you wanted to go, right? So with that tool in mind is you're just telling people who you are.
Right, exactly. And then if you have examples, and your chances are, if that is your description, you have plenty of examples of situations when you've used those particular strengths, in a productive way to create some sort of an outcome. And the more examples you have that support that leadership brand statement that you've written, the more believable it is for you and for other people. Yeah. And that's a good exercise even if you're interviewing for a new job, for example.
Right.
To have that brand statement and some examples that support it.
I know some of personality test does, right? That you're more suitable for this type of occupation versus that. Does the strengths assessment tool also?
One of the features of the strengths profile is that it offers what they call career suggestions, and so mapped to each person who takes a strengths profile. And their particular report, mapped to their realized strengths, are 6 career sectors that are common for people who have, your particular set of realized strengths. And it also maps to career sectors that are common for people who have your particular unrealized strengths. And I have found many times that's really helpful for people, especially if they're in the early stages of their career, coming out of school and trying to figure out where they want to, start their career. They often get suggestions. Or they say to me, when I was a kid, I wanted to do blah, 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 blah. It's interesting that it shows up there. Sort of validates, it sort of validates their interests.
Yeah. What do you think that when people get their strengths profile, is there more people kind of acknowledge, this is what I think of myself is, or more people are like, those are the people maybe more self-aware, matching with what the profile is saying, but would there be a surprise also, like, I did not even know?
Rarely do I see surprises, honestly. 99.9% of the time people say to me, I can't believe how right on this is. Like there weren't even that many questions. I wasn't even sure I was answering it right. And this is so me, and they laugh, or they say, well, I showed it to my partner and they laughed last night. Like, that's so me. The tool is so intelligently created, which is, why I use it so often in my work and why I'm so eager for everybody else to try it.
If you were to summarize the things that you would wish people to take away from this conversation related to the strengths tool that we have, what are those things, easy for people to remember, but as well as speaks of essence of the strengths profile?
Yeah, okay, let's see. All right, well, I guess the first thing I would say is, to me, there's almost nothing more important than being self-aware. Because when we're self-aware, we're more intentional about how we use our time, right? And we have 24 hours every day. We're not sure how long we're going to have those hours, but the best thing we can do for ourselves and the people with whom we interact is to be really thoughtful about how we spend our time. And we're spending our time using our strengths. So therefore, take a strength assessment. As you can tell by what I'm saying here, I'm a particular fan of the strengths profile because of the complexities and the amount of really helpful information that it offers. But if you don't have that opportunity, then strength spot in yourself. Ask other people for things they've observed about you, see if that can help you, so that you can be intentional in that way. And then as it relates to your particular strengths, I think the things to pay most attention to are, am I using the variety of strengths, tools, gifts that I've been given to their fullest? And what do I have to be careful not to overdo? And I hate to focus on the negative, except that's where we get ourselves into trouble.
I know you read a lot, so is there a book that around a book or two, around a strength that you would recommend our audience to read?
Yes, my new favorite book is called From Strength to Strength. Arthur Brooks is the author, and his definition of strength in his book title is not what we're talking about here today. But the reason that I love his book is because he's talking about, in particular, how we can have a life of strength and well-being and happiness consistently throughout our life if we recognize that we are changing as bodies, and our intelligence changes as we age, and we can go from a successful sort of first half of our career to a successful second half of our career if we are aware of what is changing, how our intelligence is shifting. So that's one of the main points in the book that I find so motivating. And of course, to me, underneath all that is knowing what our strengths are. And then a second reason that I love his book is he talks about the importance of relationships to our happiness and our well-being. And I know that this podcast is about emotional intelligence in leadership, and emotional intelligence is really all about understanding other people and developing relationships. And all this talk we've had today about self-reflection is really good for hopefully us as individuals, but we are operating in a day-to-day society where interacting with other people is critically important. And the best thing that we can do, maybe I'll add this to the list of sort of summary points that are important to reflect on, is to recognize that everybody is different. And the more thoughtful I can be about how I respond to this other person, consistent with what their style, what their strengths might be, what their preferences might be, the more successful our interaction and our relationship is going to be. So I'm measuring myself, and I'm recognizing this person is special and unique because of what they have, and I'm adapting myself and my thoughts and my feelings and my actions, relative to that.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you very much, Colleen, for taking your time and deep diving into this strengths profile tool with us. You will find Colleen's full bio as well as her article, and also we're also going to list her website that you might be interested to take a strengths profile assessment.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Oceanside Chat. We hope you enjoyed this conversation. If you liked it, please share our podcast and stay tuned for more episodes. We'll see you later.